Hey there, Holly Show listeners. Aaron Nabus here, and on this episode, we're joined by Peter Murrieta and David Schrader. David is no stranger to the show. We last had him on episode, I believe it was 62, way back in, what was it, 2018 and 2019.
Back when there were still cons.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And we featured 2 interviews with him on that episode, and he talked about his comic book Baby Badass. But on this episode, he's back with Peter to talk about a new project called Rafael Garcia, Henchman, which will be available on Kickstarter on Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Since we've had David on the show before, I guess we'll take some time to get to know Peter a little bit better. Peter is a TV producer and writer. He's done projects for Disney Channel. I believe it was Wizards and Waverly Place. He was a writer and producer for that show, and he won 2 Emmy Awards. That's awesome. Cartoon Network on a series called Level Up. He was an executive producer. He was a consulting producer for Lopez and for Superior Donuts. And he was co-executive producer for Mr. Iglesias. I'm sure that's just the tip of the iceberg. Am I missing anything else?
I'm executive producer of Mr. Iglesias, and we're in our 2nd season.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And why don't we get to your origin story? Where did you grow up, and what were you into when you were a kid? What was, say, 11-year-old Peter like?
All right, let's start there. 11-year-old Peter was in Tucson, where he was born. Let me scratch that. Let me start over.
Sure.
I'm just thinking about, I was born in 1966. 11-year-old Peter was in Tustin, California, down in OC.
Right.
And his dad worked for Sears. And he was into baseball and into comic books and into hard rock music.
Oh wow! What's considered hard rock?
For an 11-year-old, well, you got to remember it's 1977, and people were listening to things like Fleetwood Mac Rumors and Seals and Croft and Three Dog Night, and when you're an 11-year-old, you see something like Kiss on the Sonny and Cher show, and you go, "No, I'm for that. I'm all for that." And then that becomes kind of your gateway to legitimate rock and roll, and your Van Halen and your, like that era's hard rock.
Got it. And what was the first comic book that you remember reading?
It was All-Star Comics number 58. And it was bought at a drugstore, and it had Power Girl and Star Spangled Kid and Wildcat, I think, on the cover. And it was the adventures of Earth 2's Justice Society, and it really made me a DC kid, and it made me really love, and not just retro stuff, but the idea of the tapestry and legacy of those characters, because that was my entree. I really hadn't read the Earth 1 versions of those stories yet at all. It was just random that I picked that one up first.
Mm-hmm. Were you more of a DC kid than a Marvel kid?
I am, but I didn't get into the fight between the two fandoms, which was pretty big back then. There were definitely, shots taken in the letter columns and stuff like that. I would just love comic books. So, but I read more DC than Marvel. When I read Marvel, it was mostly Spider-Man and a little bit Fantastic Four. Those were my Marvel jams.
Mm-hmm. And as you got older, which books made the most impact on you?
That's a great question. I think I think being the age I am, I think Frank Miller's Dark Knight, I think Watchmen, I think Crisis. Those were all happening when I was either right at the end of high school or the beginning of college.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely lived through an era where like you were a strange one if you read comic books as a teenager. But I did it. I just didn't. They didn't get into my backpack and go to school. They would stay at home. But when those books came out, and I think I was probably a freshman in college, it became literature. Like you would see people at coffee shops reading Watchmen or talking about Dark Knight Returns, and so it was kind of coming out from undercover. And those books were so deep and viable that they left their mark on me for sure.
Mm-hmm. And when did you know that you wanted to pursue a career as a writer?
Well, I don't know if Dave's heard this story before. It's a very I've told it in other interviews, but I will say it here because it bears repeating. It wasn't until college. My goal in college was to get a degree in English Lit, to teach English at a high school level, and to coach baseball. That was what I wanted to do more than anything.
Oh, wow.
And then I had this professor in a humanities class. I had turned in a paper on existentialism. And I even remember, I think it was Humanities 250C, if you jog my memory enough. And Professor Swaim wrote on the paper, "See me in my office," and no grade. And this is back when you got papers handed back to you, And so I was, devastated because I had not been I was a good student, but not a great student. And I had had a couple of those in my career. And so I kind of knew that meant a trail of tears in some way. And so I went to her office and she said, "This may be the funniest paper on existentialism I've ever read." And I really wish I had it still because it wasn't such a milestone to me in the moment. And I was like, "Okay, cool. So that's an A, right? A's good." And she was like, "I don't know. You don't have any footnotes. You have no thesis statement. You just have a bunch of like jokes about all these writers that we covered." And I was like, "Okay, so what about a B? How about a B?" Because that was all I cared about. And she said, "Well, just hold on to your horses here just a second. Like, slow down. Like, have you written comedy before? Do you like sketch comedy? Do you like plays? Like, what do you want?" And she just got me on my path. And I started writing for a sketch group in college and started writing plays for the theater department. And I really fell in love with it. So it was, I don't think late bloomer for 21st century. I think a lot of kids get pressured into deciding what they want to do early. But I was just kind of rootless until then. And really grateful for her.
Nice. I guess there's still hope for me then.
Always. It's never too late.
Always hope.
What was it like winning 2 Emmy Awards?
Along with my marriage and my children, like the highlight.
Can you describe that feeling when you were on stage?
Yeah, the first one was I can describe the events. Like I got out of the we drove my 1975 Plymouth that I had turned into a hot rod. We drove it to the ceremony, right? Got to be a vato when I can be a vato, And it had electronic doors. You couldn't, no handles, shaved handles, and got out of the car right behind Robin Williams, and so like walked the carpet. He gave me a joke.
Yeah,
it was great because.
Do you remember what it was?
I do. I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we got to the ceremony. And we really weren't expected to win. There were a couple of other Disney shows that were up against us, and they were sort of the favorite child of the network, and we were sort of the orphan child of the network. And so it was, a shock. And they come down and they tell you when it's your category, there's like a a PA with a headset that comes down into the auditorium, and it just says like, "Oh yeah, your category's next." If you get up, remember it's just producers, no cast, because it was a best series, and so then they leave, and I turn on my cast, and they're like, "So what are we doing?" And I was like, "Well, they told us that no cast can come up, so that's what they told us." And then David DeLuise goes, "Well, what are we gonna do?" And I said, "Well, if I were you and we win, I would definitely run up there because it's probably hard to stop us if we're all running."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we did. And so it was really joyous, and we all got up on stage and against the rules, which is another nice hallmark of me. And we had an awesome time. And it was just floating on air. And then we got to the banquet, and the proof positive that Disney Channel didn't think we were going to win is they had set out the seating chart for all the tables at the banquet, and they had interspersed Disney execs at the Hannah Montana table and the Sweet Life of Zach and Cody table, and we just got to sit with ourselves, which is great.
And just for reference, the Emmys were for Wizards of Waverly Place, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And then the next year, and the reason I was saving the Robin Williams joke is I forgot that was the following year. It was when I was on the carpet with Robin Williams, because I was nominated twice that year. I was nominated as the producer of the show and also as the producer of the movie, because there was all the same Best Children's Program category.
Mm.
And so when I was behind Robin Williams, I told him what a fan I was, and he asked me what I was nominated for, and I told him I'm nominated twice. And he goes, oh my gosh. He goes, well, if anyone asks you a question, you just tell them, hey, I'm nominated twice, so the one thing I know for sure is I'm guaranteed to go home a loser.
Oh, man. So quick.
Yeah. And I used it. I used it in a couple of red carpet interviews, and that win was really, really special to me, because I got to bring my wife and my father and mother and my sons got to come to that. That was really special.
That's awesome. Rest in peace, Robin Williams.
Rest in peace.
So you mentioned being, I guess you're proud to be a Vato that night. And I think briefly from what I read about you online, you're proud of broadening the diversity of the entertainment industry through ensuring Latinos have opportunities to shine behind and in front of the camera.
Yes.
Why is that important to you?
Well, when I grew up, maybe one of the reasons why I never thought about writing television is nobody I knew did that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked on TV, I'm going to say something that I want to be factual, because it's funny. I've been doing this for 22 years and I've had some success. And then I see a lot of people that are doing well now that say, I grew up with no representation. And I'm like, hey, man, what about Wizards? What about Greetings from Tucson? What about, because I've been doing it. It hasn't been huge, but like George Lopez has been out there, but it hasn't been enough. It really hasn't been enough. And when I was a kid, you had Chico and the Man, and you had Epstein on a show called Welcome Back, Kotter. But then you grow up and you find out that Robert Hedges that played him was not Puerto Rican. And so then that idea starts to percolate in your head. And as I got my first couple of jobs, I just realized that there was this lack of representation in all aspects, and that we needed better representation as writers. We needed better representation as directors, as decision makers who can buy things. And it was sort of, not incredibly altruistic, I have to say, to not beat my chest too much, that it was about survival, because Hollywood also pigeonholes you. And, the first couple of years I was here, they were like, hey, what's your story? And I tell them my story, and they're like, great, okay, so you do those kinds of shows. And so they would put me up for jobs because they didn't really have a lot of Latin shows. And my first couple of jobs were writing jokes for Black sitcoms, because I think, agency and Hollywood is like, well, he's a minority and I don't know where to put him, so let's put him here. So it was a little bit of survival, trying to create shows that I could fit on. But then it became more of a mission.
Yeah, I feel you there. I'm Filipino myself, and ever since I learned that Wills Portacio's bishop was supposed to be Filipino, and also that Johnny Rico from Starship Troopers was supposed to be Filipino. Ever since I learned that, it's been sort of a mission of mine to not only, showcase other creators that are of color, but especially being Filipino, to start highlighting a lot of Filipino creators that I think deserve more attention.
Yeah, 100%. On Mr. Iglesias this season, we had one of Gabriel's pals, Joe Coy, on, and he is so talented.
Mm-hmm.
And he, just hanging out with him, we got to hear so many cool stories, about the Filipino community, and also, so many great jokes. And he does a great bit in his stand-up about, I think, Lou Diamond Phillips, and growing up and thinking that Richie Valens must have been Filipino, because he's like, oh my God, look, Richie Valens is Filipino, and so it's cool. And I think that those kinds of conversations, I mean, I feel blessed that those are even happening, right? We've got a show with a Latin lead with an incredibly diverse cast, and then along comes Gabriel's friends to make it even more, looking like America.
Mm-hmm.
And it's awesome.
And when did you? I know that you're a lifelong fan of comic books, but when did you, I guess, decide to take the plunge into making your first comic book, which is Rafael Garcia, Henchman?
It took a long time, man. I've always wanted to, but I've been either busy with my career
mm-hmm.
and my family, or I've been intimidated because, I remember buying the Dennis O'Neil, writing comics book that came out. I remember buying Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. I'm actually looking at it right now, sitting on my desktop, and just devouring it. And even I think Will Eisner wrote a book about writing comics. And there's a bit more books about art and comics, and a bit fewer books about writing and comics. And so I would read them and get charged up to do it, and then I'd get another job, and that would fall by the wayside. And then not too long ago, I was talking to some friends about it, and there's a story that I really wanted to tell, and it was a story inspired by the fact that when we go to see Avengers movies, there's no Latin Avenger, and we went to see Suicide Squad, and there was a Latin hero, and he got killed halfway through the movie, and just thinking where are they? And that's what inspired us thinking about doing it. And I was like, let's do it. Let's do it right now. Let me just force myself to make the time. So it wasn't until real recently that I took the plunge.
Mm-hmm. And, I guess you have a connection with Meltdown Comics. You used to have a podcast there. Is that where you met David?
Well, yeah, it's funny. I was a customer of Meltdown, because I've already told you my age. I was a customer of Meltdown probably from the moment I moved there. I think I went to Golden Apple a few times, and then I found a Meltdown on Sunset when it was on the north side of the street. Mm-hmm. Became friends with Gaston. I had my office when they moved across to the south side. I had my writing office there for about a year, up above the staircase, in what later became one of their podcast rooms. And then, I moved on to a lot and did a bunch of things and just always stayed helpful to him. I invested in one of their stores. And then when their podcast network started up and they wanted help with that, I jumped back over there and got involved. And that's where I ran into Dave Schrader again, because we had already met, because Dave had taken classes and performed at my comedy theater on Fairfax. Bang. And that's where we originally met, and we kind of ran back into each other when I was over there doing the podcast network. So I have a long-standing, love affair and deep abiding of Meltdown.
And your podcast, he had a great podcast there too. Tell him about the Expendables, right? Is that what the
Remarkables?
The Remarkables. Sorry, not the Expendables. The Remarkables, and the story behind that was fun.
Yeah, we did a podcast called The Remarkables. I don't even know if it's up and available, but if it is, people should listen to it. Maybe I'll try to find the link and send it to you. It's a talk show about the Remarkables, which is what this world that I was creating calls people with extra abilities or powers. And it's an interview podcast, and it's got two hosts, and we have on like an ex-sidekick to interview. We had on a lawyer who handles superhero cases, a henchman. We had on a woman who had a story to tell about a hero who had assaulted her. Like we really tried to make it real close to the bone and real, but it was all about a universe like that. And it was improvised, and it was really fun.
Wow. Yeah, hopefully you can send me that link, and hopefully it's still up. I mean, I think a show like that would serve a lot of people these days as a form of great escapism.
I think you're right. I should look for that. It might be a time for that.
I mean, there was a feeling to it now looking back. Like I've been watching The Boys, on Amazon, and just that world. And so imagine like these podcasters interviewing people that have these run-ins and work in some of the just like henchmen in some of those positions and jobs, whether it's for the superheroes or for the evil guys, and like just kind of looking at it in a real world situation. That was what was really cool about it. You handled it like it was really real, and it had like an authenticity to it, that podcast.
Yeah, and we had people that were crackpots and then true believers, and also I think we even had not drama, but we had the two co-hosts. One of them was much more skeptical than the other. We really tried to build narratives in it that you could listen to week.
That's awesome. I guess we'll bring David back into the mix. David is a writer and filmmaker. He has a comedy. I guess it's available, online to watch, called NoHo, a 90s slacker comedy.
That's right, my first film.
Right. Bloodline is a horror movie. Mary Tyler, Millennial. It's an upcoming web series.
Actually, that's going to be a feature. It's a
feature.
It's a feature film deconstructed web series. Like we will probably break it down into a web series after it's released as a feature. It's kind of an experimental film. We're in post production on that right now.
Okay. Now, is it Mary Tyler in reference to Mary Tyler Moore?
No, it's called Mary Tyler, Millennial.
Got it.
And it's about a girl named Mary Tyler who moves to LA, and she works for this company. It's a startup. Like got a mysterious device that everyone's enamored of, but it turns out that it's basically like a cult that she's in. And,
oh wow!
So it's a very dark comedy. Imagine like Office Space meets The Shining, and it's like a haunted startup. So it's a dark comedy.
Right. You even have a novel to your name, Exile in Hawaii, but that's your only one because I guess you felt it was so good that there was no reason to write another one. Right?
There was no need for another.
Is it the greatest American novel?
I call it my not so great American novel, and I found it. I lived in Hawaii at the time when I wrote it. I was probably 26, and I lived there, and I'd saved up some money, and I went there with a girlfriend at the time, and she worked at the VA, like doing some stuff, and that's what I did. I just worked on a novel in Hawaii. It was my like Hemingway experience, and it's not very good, but it is a novel, so technically I did write a novel. It was very Forrest Gumpian. It's a comedy. It kind of stretches from like the East Coast of the U.S. to the West Coast to Hawaii, and interstitials of like history and things, but it's kind of a mess. I was in my 20s, and I didn't quite know what I'm doing. That's a hallmark of my career. I don't always know what I'm doing. But I want to get back real quick to how I met Peter, because
Sure.
He did start Bang with had some great groups there, and these guys are all Second City, Chicago alumni, and it was just a really great training ground, and I had some of the best teachers in improv you can imagine, and Peter and his wife being some of them. But I did a film for them when they started doing some short films, and that was called Little League Jesus. So Peter was a producer on that. So technically, we'd kind of worked together before on that.
And I remember. Can I tell that story?
Sure.
I mean, I remember it wasn't your first movie, was it?
No. It was something that I had done like as a student project on video, and then I kind of made it longer and submitted it. So no, it wasn't my first
Okay.
film, but it was an earlier project that I had that we kind of made it into a bigger production.
It was very good, but I had notes on it, and I was working already as a producer, and I remember a couple of notes were like, "Hey, I think this conversation's too long. I think this is a little too long." And Dave was very cool and like listened and took it all in, and then I think didn't do them right.
I don't remember that.
Oh, you don't remember this? Oh, this is very cool. This is very cool. It has a great end to it.
Okay.
So then we screened it at the theater. And I remember afterwards in the lobby, and this is what makes someone is like, really got their head around craftsmanship, is he came up to me, and it was just exciting to have the movie screened. And he came up to me and he's like, those things you told me? Yeah, watching it with an audience, you were absolutely right about that one conversation with Dave and Evan. And I want to go back in there, and I know where I want to make trims. And I was like, oh my God, that's great. That's great.
I'm glad it has a good ending, because I give a lot of notes sometimes too, and I've always have been an overwriter, and you fall in love with your own dialogue and all this other stuff, and I've learned, working with editors, like obviously less is always more. If you can tell the story and get to point A to point B, sometimes you lose jokes you like, but you find out that not everyone likes those jokes anyhow, so you better make it move. So I'm glad it has a good ending. I'm sorry I didn't take them initially. Maybe that's why we didn't work together for so long in between.
No.
But no, it's like, you do have to do that, and you have to, and the same with like a comic book. Like I've learned that lesson with comics. Like, we're working on this anthology now, and me and my friend Clay Adams are doing a story, and I started compressing this idea we'd had from something else, and it was, he goes, I don't know if we can do this in 8 pages, and he just kind of came back at it and condensed it and said it's a different story, and I'm fine with that. I think you have to learn to live with just letting things fall away, and try to just stay with something that's a little more just a little more centered, and just tells the story A to B, and don't get wrapped up in all these other grandiose ideas you might have had.
That's definitely good advice. What else have you been doing, David, besides eating the awesome food that your wife cooks?
Yeah, my wife is a chef, and she's working on a book right now, so I do get to try some of these things. But besides the post-production for that movie, I am doing an anthology called Nightmare Theater, and Peter's going to have a story in that's really cool as well. But it's got Charlie Stickney and David Pepos, and tons of other people are involved with this. So we've got some really great creators that are involved, some great artwork, and that's going to be launching in probably mid to late October. Okay. So first I'm worried about Henchman. We got to get Henchman off and going on the 8th, and then it'll be Nightmare Theater, and then probably pushing to next year will be a book called Cannibals on Mars that I did with Tony Donnelly, who did Albert Einstein Time Mason for Action Lab, and that's a really fun book. It's a space horror pulp thing. And then the second volume of Baby Badass sometime in early 2021 too. So besides all that, not a damn thing going on. That's like that old Flip Wilson story. I don't know if you ever heard. Peter, you know that Flip Wilson story?
No.
About the gardener that dropped acid, and I'll try to tell a condensed version, but basically he dropped some acid, and he worked for this really rich guy, and the guy came back from vacation, and the guy goes, hey, Bill, what's going on? He goes, nothing going on except the dog died. He's like, the dog died? How'd the dog die? He's like, well, he found some dead horse meat in the barn. He ate it and he died. He said, dead horse meat in the barn? How's there dead horse meat in the barn? It's like, well, the barn caught on fire. It burned up the horse and the dog ate the meat and died. It's like, what the hell's going on around here? I just left for a vacation. I came back. He's like, well, it was the sparks from the house. Caught on the barn, burned up the barn, the horse meat, the dog ate the meat and died. He's like, sparks from the house? Hey, you better tell me what the hell really happened around here. He's like, well, your mother-in-law died, and they put candles around the coffin. The candles shot up the wall and burned up the this is the roof, and sparks flew over and burned up the barn, and the horse and the dog and died. And it just goes on like this for a while. Basically, it gets down to like, well, your wife ran away with the milkman. When your mother-in-law heard about it, she had a heart attack and died. You put the candles around the coffin shot up the wall, burned up. He goes, other than that, ain't a damn thing going on. So that's the basic story of that.
Wow.
I don't know if that's clear, but like Flip Wilson obviously told it way better.
No, that's great, and that's evocative. And Dave's been such a great partner because, I'm currently writing a feature for DreamWorks, and I've got a pilot for Amazon. I've got a couple of other things that are secret that I can't talk about,
That are very exciting, but they're
very
secret.
very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, too bad we're not doing a podcast at a bar.
I know, right? But he's been an incredible partner in Henchman in that. And I also have to give a shout out to Jonas, who is sort of my right hand.
He's a juggler.
Just making everything go, and I wake up in the morning and somebody tells me, hey, you're going to do this podcast. And then don't forget, you got to drive to Tucson and pick up that thing. And hey, this is your whole day. And so Dave's been incredible at sharing the workload with me on this.
Mm-hmm.
That's very generous of you. Peter is super busy. He's got a lot going on. I don't think he mentioned, but he's also teaching. He's a professor teaching writing. So yeah, I just try to like take what he had, because obviously this was his idea, this was his creation, and he really had it. It just needed to be put into comic book form, and we kind of did some restructuring. I felt more comfortable a little bit along the way to maybe add a scene or like a character here or whatever, but I didn't want to step on his toes because this is his baby. So I told this story before. I felt like I got lucky because Peter came up to me at one of these cons and we started talking about it. I guess he doesn't know a ton of people that had made comic books because, like, I was still pretty new to it myself. So I think I kind of got lucky that we knew each other, and it's been a great experience. I'm very, very honored and pleased to be working with him.
Awesome. I guess we'll go ahead and get into the book. This book will speak to fans of The Office, Parks and Recreation, Young Justice, and anyone that wonders if Facebook and Tesla may not have our best interests at heart. And of course, anyone who's had to sit through management training or a Tony Robbins corporate workshop. You mentioned David Pepose earlier, the writer of Spencer and Locke and Get to the Chapel.
The OZ now.
The OZ, right. And he has a quote that you guys use, and it goes like this, quote, "A down-on-his-luck minion with a heart of gold, Rafael Garcia, a henchman, is like Kevin Smith with a cape." With that said, how did you guys arrive at this idea?
Well, I've always wanted to think about the fringes of these universes and where the people of color, where the Latin people are, where the Filipino people are, where the people that we don't see are, and I wanted to chart their rise through this system. And I also have always felt like, we work for these giant companies and there's fewer and fewer of them as they consolidate. They don't have our interests at heart, and we aren't all bad people, but we have to go to work for bad people.
Cool. And tell me about Starburn Industries Press.
Well, I'm on a charity board. El Cine is an incredible charity. I got to give them a shout out. They do a lot of community-based screenings and work. They're a film organization. They're all about just diversity of voice in film, and they're really incredible. And I'm on the board with a couple of people from Starburn's Industries. And so we were just chatting about different things, about animation and what they do and what I do. And we started talking about this comic book, and they were like, we would love to hear about it. And so we sent them off. Did we send them the script, right? We didn't send them any art. We sent them the script, maybe, and some sketches. And they were like, oh my gosh, we want to get involved in this.
So I guess the pitching process wasn't too hard.
It wasn't, no. When we had already written the script, we were trying to figure out what to do with it. And they were just all over it. They were like, this is great, and we want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to add to that, David?
No, it's just they've been great to work with. They're super cool, obviously, but they're beautiful, funny, and strange, quote unquote. publishing arm. Like they do some really cool, unique things. So I think they saw this fitting in. And also we're doing a bilingual edition, which is kind of rare for a small press, but also rare just for a comic and a comic on Kickstarter. So, we were about to launch this Kickstarter, and that's when they became involved. So then we had to kind of push pause on it. And they have all these cool things they're doing. There's going to be a Starburns Industries tour. So for all the Rick and Morty fans out there, if you want to see where the sausage is made, like post-COVID, that would be available. There's some really cool tiers where you can get drawn into the book. You can get drawn onto the cover. I want to mention that Ben Herrera is doing the art for the book, and he's got like some great superhero credentials. He's a great artist. We got a cool cover by Kyle Roberts, who did the Vacation cover. Ramon Villalobos is doing a cover. Dan Mendoza is doing a cover. So some really great Latin artists are involved. Jules Rivera is doing a pinup for us. But yeah, there's some great tiers. They've been super, super cool. Michael over there and Simon, just great guys. And again, thrilled that they're part of this.
Yeah, tell Ben I said hi, because I believe we grew up together. He's from the same neck of the woods that I am in San Diego, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I will. He's great.
He is great.
And what's the first issue going to be like? What can people expect?
Well, I think, I'm going to steal what Dave said yesterday. It starts off with these two henchmen, and their only job is to guard the perimeter while cargo planes get loaded with who knows what. And it starts with the idea of one guy, our guy, Rafa, saying, wouldn't it be great to know what is in those crates? Like, wouldn't it be great? And his friend, who's much more evocative of the regular way henchmen think, is, no, I don't want to know that. Being out on the perimeter means you can survive whenever stuff goes bad, and I don't want to be any closer. I don't want to know that stuff. And so thus begins the journey. He's got this inquisitive mind, and he wants to better himself, and he wants to make things right so that he can get his ex-girlfriend back. And so he's got a lot of drive to leave the perimeter and move.
And then he finds some surprises along the way, because careful what you wish for type of thing. As he moves into middle management, everything isn't as it appears. Obviously, like he's working for an evil organization, and then there's like the good guys that they have to watch out for. But there's some cross referencing that happens in those two worlds, and his journey through that, and figuring out like really what is the fine line between good and evil. But he's a lovable character. Like you kind of really want to root for this guy, and see where it takes him. So that the first book is kind of his journey up through middle management, becoming a squad leader. And it is funny. It's a comedy, but it's in this superhero world. So, it's kind of got that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead feel to it when they're just kind of hanging out on the peripheral and on the edges of what the action is. Although there is action still too.
And how did you find your creative team?
Well, Peter was super busy, obviously, and he gave me a lot of leeway to like at least put the feelers out. And I think we used a couple places. There's a great thing on Facebook, which is the comic book artist and writers like connection, and it's got like 30,000 members or whatever. So you can put an ad in that is very specific about the type of art that you're looking for, and you get inundated with artists, and then you kind of go through and see whose schedule works and all that. So I tried to pare that down for Peter, because he's been so swamped that like if I can give him like 5 or 6 like options, then we go from there. And Ben was one of those guys that just like he kind of got the material. He has experience with that. He's worked for DC and Marvel, and it fit. I thought it fit. Like we could have gone another direction that was more indie style, but I felt like because it was a workplace comedy and kind of funny, that you want to kind of meld that and have it look like a superhero book in some ways, and that way you get that world immediately. You agree with that, Peter?
Yes, 100%. I think we always talked about, and it's not necessarily he's his own style, but we always talked about Invincible as an indie book that had a superhero feel.
Right.
And it wasn't that we were looking for something that was like that, but that sort of inspired the people that Dave brought to me. And then we really liked the way his lines were and how he dealt with the characters in a way that allowed them to be funny, but not be funny looking.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and then so Ben brought his colorist in, Emmanuel Torres, and then I brought the letterer Clay Adams, who I've worked with on some other projects, and Clay runs Fried Comics and did Red Xmas and PBOW and Dead Skins. He just did a Kickstarter for it, but he's got a lot of experience with Kickstarters too, so he's been really valuable in shoring up some of this other stuff that we don't know as much about, and that's kind of the team. And then we've reached out to some of the variant cover artists, and Starburns has had a hand in that as well. So it's just kind of come together really nicely and fairly quickly too. I want to say, when did we start this, Peter? It was probably less than a year ago, though, right?
Less than a year ago, yeah.
Less than a year ago, and look, I'm still trying to get Baby Badass Volume 2 out, and it's just like a book a year till I get 3 books. So this moved fairly quickly, and it's a fairly substantial book too. It's about 39, 40 pages. It's going to be this Kickstarter book.
I think Starburns really, don't you think, Dave, Starburns really pushed they helped make it quicker?
Yeah, I think so, for sure, and really offered a lot of different things that we hadn't even really thought about, and it's made this Kickstarter, I think, much more appealing.
Mm-hmm. I guess we can take a quick break, and we'll do a Thunder Round.
I love it. I'm excited about it.
All right, round. Here we go. The first question is, King Kong or Godzilla?
Do we both answer?
Sure.
King Kong.
Okay.
Oh, we do. Is this like a newlywed game? Do we have to see how well we know each other?
No. It's
okay.
You guys can answer for yourselves.
King Kong. I mean, King Kong. I feel bad for. I mean, he's not a villain at all. He's like a sweetheart that's misunderstood.
I also think anybody that's origin story isn't radiation, I just prefer.
That's a good point.
Right. He's a little more natural in his strangeness.
There you go. What statement would you have Bart from The Simpsons write on the chalkboard?
Go ahead, Peter. You go first.
I promise to start following the rules tomorrow.
Nice.
2020 is a figment of our imagination.
All right. It's 10 p.m. and you're starving after a full day of writing. What kind of food would you be craving?
The chicken tacos combo from Terry's Mexican on Melrose and Cahuenga.
Wow.
I don't think I can beat that specificity. But I would probably crave something Italian, like lasagna or something, even though I haven't had that in a long time. Just something warm and Italian is comforting to me. And that's more my speed when it's been a long day.
So are those tacos worth a road trip from San Diego?
I think they are, but there's other places you can go to if you're going to make that trip up there.
Okay.
And San Diego's probably got some pretty good tacos down there too.
Yeah, we have some pretty good Mexican food.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
If Jack Kirby was still alive, what would you ask him?
I would ask him if he'd do a cover for us.
Nice.
Nice.
Because I mean, he'd be really old at this point, and maybe he'd do it. Why not?
I guess I would want to know. I guess I'm about knowledge. I guess I would want to know. Right? Isn't there always been this mystery about who really did create all this stuff? How much did he have to do with it versus Stan? I guess I'd want to know his side of that story.
Yeah, because he spoke on it a little bit, but not as much as
Stan.
Yeah, no,
that's right.
Yeah, but definitely not. But yeah, I mean, there's stuff out there on it, but yeah, you want to get the straight poop.
It's like to hell with the Marvel method.
Jeez.
Right.
Well, I guess there's sort of evidence of notes in the margins that I guess people can kind of see and get a glimpse of maybe how it was.
For sure. I just think Stan so dominated the microphone over the years about it. It should be nice to hear from Jack.
True. I agree. Spending more time at home during the pandemic has given me the opportunity to watch and read all sorts of things. Anything interesting that you watched or read lately?
Well, as you know, at the beginning of this conversation, I'm a big DC guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a charter subscriber to the DC Universe service, which I know is going away, and that's lamented. And so I've used that in my very crazy collector way to try to watch all the live action TV series that are on it, not the old library ones, but the originals. So I'm currently about halfway through the second season of Krypton, which is a crazy deep dive, right? You don't see a lot of people running around talking about Krypton, but I'm watching that, and then I'll be on to the third season of Young Justice, and then the second season of Doom Patrol. Nice.
I love Doom Patrol.
I do too. I love the first season.
I started it and haven't finished it yet. I got to get back to it. But just recently, I've loved Lovecraft Country. Like, I think it's amazing. And then I just started Raised by Wolves on HBO, the Ridley Scott series that definitely has like a Star Trek feel to it, like old school Star Trek, but like really well done. And I mean, I love all that stuff. It definitely reminds me of like Black Mirror sci-fi or something. I that's kind of my jam. I've realized after a while that, with like Annihilation and all of those things that what's his name does. Yeah, that's what I've been enjoying watching.
I was on Peter's Instagram and saw an image about coffee and donuts and working a construction job. What's your favorite donut, and what was the first job you ever had?
Oh, my favorite donut is a maple cake donut.
And where do you get those now, Peter?
Well, I get them at Trejo's.
Yeah, of course, obviously.
Of course I do. Right near my house at Santa Monica and La Brea. Did you say my first construction job?
No, your first job.
My first job, my very, very first job, I was sort of an errand boy for a real estate appraisal firm in Tucson. And this is in the early 80s. I couldn't drive yet, but they had offices pretty close to downtown, and I would take blueprints and photographs and go to the county recorder and just kind of run documents back and forth pre-fax. I was a live fax machine.
What's a fax machine? No, I'm just joking.
Do I get the same question?
Yes.
I love Krispy Kreme, like chocolate glazed donut. I do like Trejo's donuts, but it's chocolate glazed, sometimes filled. I know it's a little obscene, but those are great. And my first job was at a place called Daly's Juice in Verona, in Pittsburgh. And I remember I was like 15, which seemed young. Maybe I was like 14 or 15. My mom took me to this job, and it was a factory that made like juices and cocktail mixes and things like that. And there were people that had been working there since the 40s, and this was probably in like the 80s, right? And it was an assembly line. And I was just putting, like, this stuff would come down the assembly line, and I would take two hands and put two things in the box and move the box down. And you just do that hour after hour. It was like mind-numbing and hard work. And then you would stack the boxes. So you'd have that job where you'd stack the boxes on pallets, and you'd get burns on your arm because the hot glue machine, like, the glue would kind of splatter and be on your arm. So it was horrifying. And I remember after a few weeks of doing it, I told my mom, she picked me up, and I'm like, Mom, I can't do this. I don't want to do this anymore. And she looks at me and she says, well, now you know what you don't want to do for a living. And it made me think a lot about it, because there are people that have been there forever, and it's good hard work and it's honest work, but it was not something that I wanted to do. And I finished it out. I finished the summer job out, but I never had a job quite like that again. I've had hard jobs, but that particular one was like a real trial by fire. Like, this is a job that you will sweat and not make much money. I think minimum wage back then was like $2.70 or something. Mm-hmm. And so that was my first job.
Wow. If you could teleport to anywhere in the world right now, where would you go, and why did you pick that place?
Peter, do you want me to go first?
I'm just thinking. I can go first if you want.
Yeah, you go. You go first.
I guess I would want to go to either Fenway Park or Dodger Stadium, and I'd want to teleport somewhere where I could hide and watch a game.
Why would you want to hide?
Because we're not allowed to watch games live.
Oh, okay.
I want to hide behind one of those cutouts or behind a post or something.
That's
Gotcha.
That's a true baseball fan right there.
How about you, David?
I would go to Tahiti, and I don't know if I need to describe that to anyone or if there's any other reasons. It's the place I've always wanted to go. I've always wanted to vacation. It is like on the list that someday I'll go to Tahiti. That's it. Like that's where I'd love to go.
Nice. David, is Ring of Fire still your song of choice when it comes to karaoke? What else would you like to sing to close the bar down?
Did I say Ring of Fire?
You did.
What was I thinking that day? Shit. Yeah, I'll stick with it because I really can't think of anything else I would say. Maybe My Way. I have sang My Way several times at karaoke.
Okay. Peter, what would you close the karaoke bar down with?
Jump Around by House of Pain.
Oh, wow. There you go. That's gonna get the party started again.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome.
After I put them to sleep with My Way, Peter gets everyone.
Right.
I guess we'll go back to talking about Rafael Garcia, Henchman. You already addressed. I was going to talk a little bit about how it's going to be in Spanish as well. Is there anything else that you want to add? I mean, I have a question. What's it like having two writers?
It's great. I love it. I love collaborating. And I love feeling free to like make mistakes or try something and then just check in and go, does that all make sense? Before we hit send, and Dave's added some cool scenes. And I think we've had a good time sort of negotiating tone, and it's been really fun. And I do a lot of collaboration in my other full-time jobs. So I love it.
I love collaborating too. Like any of my short films, or even this one I did, this one that we're working on now. Like we shot it in a weekend. We shot a feature film in a weekend, and you have to have people that are willing to really collaborate on a guerrilla project, quite like that is. And I love it. And Peter's been so awesome, and just being able to like talk about it. That's probably the most fun part for me. Is like when we spent a lot of time. Just talking about it last Comic-Con, not this past summer, but the summer before. We walked around and we had dinner and we just talked it out and talked about different ideas and, like he said, tonally, like how it would be, and maybe this character's name, and like I'd have to look up a character because I think Marvel had a character that was named that, so let's adjust it, and just that back and forth. And I think what you get to is you're kind of hammering it out and you're making it better, and you're sharpening the sword as you bounce it off of each other, and it's been great. It's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing volume 2 of this one with them.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you'd like our audience to know about when it comes to Rafael Garcia, Henchman?
I think it's going to be a blast. It's fun. I think the things we've been talking about that are underneath the book make it cool, but it's a fun book.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like it's kind of the type of book you need right now. Like you need to be able to have some escapism, and I love humor books as well. Like to me, it just can't all be capes without the laughs. And so I think the dynamic of like who he's working for and like what he finds out, that's kind of a fun ride to go on.
Awesome. So, go ahead. Sorry.
No, just saying. So hopefully people will join us when this thing launches on the 8th.
And it'll run, I believe, until October 7th, maybe?
Yeah, it's a month.
Okay. And I guess, Peter, maybe you can put your professor hat on. What's one piece of advice for aspiring writers?
Write every day, and don't be bound by the restrictions you place on yourself. By that I mean, formatting, length. Like when you're starting, just write, and then you'll seek out and find other ways to make it fit. And I'm writing a TV 1-hour drama. What does that look like? But don't let that be the stop of you doing the thing.
David, did you want to add anything to that?
That's great advice. The only thing I would add is that don't get into the comparison game too. I think everyone's guilty of it to some extent. I know that I definitely have imposter syndrome every single day with whatever I'm doing. And that certainly includes writing and creating. But if you have your own voice, no one can take that from you. So don't compare it to someone else, or don't try to write a book as good as Watchmen. Just write a book that only you could write, and I think that shines through.
Were there any challenges that either of you faced from switching from writing for movies and TV versus sequential storytelling?
Well, I was just saying to Dave yesterday that it's been not a challenge as much as it's a discovery of sitting down and looking at my page and trying to design the number of panels to fit the beat of the story. And then also when you get down to the actual panel, deciding is that panel the beginning of or the end of the action I'm describing? Because that has a lot to do with what the word balloons are in the panel. And just that very specific scenic discovery is the kind of thing that will resonate in my writing wherever I go.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have anything to add. Yeah. What he said.
I guess we'll start closing out the show with some superhero shout-outs. I know you gave some thanks earlier in the podcast. Is there anybody else that you want to sort of give thanks to right now?
Peter, you want to go first?
I'll go second.
Okay. I would say, there's been some people that have been really helpful with the Kickstarter process, and that includes Rylan Grant and David Pepos, even though he just had his first one. It was very successful. But Charlie Stickney has always been super helpful. He runs amazing Kickstarters. These are people that you should kind of follow and see how they do it, and kind of follow their lead with how they put it together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we're still having conventions, I would totally recommend all these panels that Rylan puts together.
Conventions, it seems so long ago now. But they'll be back someday.
Definitely. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the Hall H Show. Where can people find you online?
I'm at Mighty Peter on Instagram and Twitter. And you can try to find me on Facebook. If we have mutual friends, I'll take you. But otherwise, no.
I'm at Schraderopolis on Twitter, Instagram, and at The Baby Badass for those as well. And Facebook, same thing.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on the show. And thank you, Hall H Show listeners, for tuning into the Hall H Show podcast, where we love showcasing independent comic creators like Peter Murrieta and David Schrader. Please check out the Rafael Garcia Henchman Kickstarter, which starts on September 8th, 2020, and ends on October 7th, 2020. If you believe in our mission to be the voice of independent pop culture creators, we would love a rating, hopefully 5 stars, and a comment on Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher. Also, please share our episodes using the hashtag HallHShow. Peace, cheers, and if you'd like to recommend a guest for our show, please reach out to us on any of our social media accounts or our website, hallh.com.